and Jay peanut butter and jelly sandwich, and the peanut butter got stuck in his throat. And they still wouldn't let him have water. They made him stand in front of the window that they put an X on the floor and an X on the window, and the sun was coming straight through it, and there was no air conditioning there, and I couldn't do nothing about it. And because if I said something, I would end up getting in trouble too.
A scorching hot July in Dallas, Texas was absolutely unbearable for the average person who had access to AC and water, but life ending for 10-year-old Jonathan Lloyd James in 2011. His disgusting and toxic stepmother and biological father deprived him of the most essential source of life that all living things need to survive: water. Hi everyone, I'm Sarah. I'm a certified coach. I specialize in abuse recovery from narcissistic, sociopathic, and psychopathic abuse. Fraternal twins Joseph and Jonathan James were staying just 1 month with their biological father, Michaelrayjames, their mother, Marie Albertson, and her 12-year-old son from a previous relationship, BJ. This visitation was court-ordered. In the James home, there was no air conditioner during the severe heat wave that reached temperatures higher than 100 degrees Fahrenheit. News channels encourage residents of Dallas to stay hydrated and to limit their time outdoors. Tina Albertson chose to punish Jonathan by not only depriving him of water, but also ordering her stepson to stand on an X she duct taped to the kitchen floor in front of a window. She also placed an X on the window and forced Jonathan to look out the window with the hot sun beating down on him. And that's not all. For at least 3 days, Tina made Jonathan stand on his tiptoes to reach a tack, forced him to hold a 5-pound bag of potatoes over his head, made him sleep in a hot, unair-conditioned room, and had him eat peanut butter and jelly sandwiches that got stuck in his throat, which added more suffering to his already water-deprived body. Jonathan's body was shutting down. He unfortunately collapsed and was rushed to the hospital by ambulance on July 25, 2011. Jonathan arrived at the hospital with no pulse, bleeding chapped lips, and a completely empty bladder, which indicated severe dehydration, as a healthy and hydrated human's bladder never fully empties. Doctors spent over 45 minutes trying to save Jonathan's life, but tragically, he didn't make it. At the time, Jonathan's biological mother, twin brother Joseph, and maternal grandmother, who was actually on staff at the hospital, were at his bedside as he passed. Soon after, police began their investigation. In all cases of child death, the Dallas Police Department has a policy to always investigate any case of child death in the city if the child was not under any prior medical care. What the police found out during their investigation not only shocked them, but also shocked the community. Police quickly began to question Tina and Michael. Both parents told police that Jonathan was normal while he visited, that he played video games and watched TV, but suddenly collapsed out of nowhere, due to lack of central air, in their opinion. The parents' story was so convincing, a person who heard the story on the news donated money to the James family so they could fix the AC. However, the detectives saw through Tina and Michael's stories once Joseph courageously spoke the truth. Homicide detectives from the police department informed the Child Abuse Division, and Joseph was interviewed at Dallas Children's Advocacy Center. Joseph revealed that Jonathan was punished from Friday to Monday, 4 days until he collapsed. Joseph explained that Tina wouldn't allow Jonathan to have water if he didn't eat, that she made him sleep in an unair-conditioned room when the AC went out, while other rooms in the home did have window AC units, and that Jonathan was desperately trying to get water from the bathroom sink, and Tina refused to let him have any. Tina also put Jonathan in timeout while having a large jug of water beside him, and refused to let him have a single drop. Now, having the horrific details from Joseph, Tina and Michael were interviewed. In Tina's first interview, she did admit it was hot in her home and outside, but she was making sure all 3 children in the home were drinking water. She also had the audacity to say Jonathan was drinking 4 to 5 glasses of water an hour. Detectives pressed her more to tell the truth, and she admitted she restricted Jonathan's water intake, but it was for 5 reasons that she deemed appropriate. She claimed Jonathan's water was restricted due to him wetting the bed, failing to eat, drinking water after his father, taking food and water into his room, and receiving a timeout. Tina also kept claiming Jonathan still drank the 4 to 5 glasses of water per hour. Did Tina really think she could pull the 5 ridiculous reasons for not giving a child water and then continue to claim Jonathan drank 32 to 40 cups of water in a day? That sounds absolutely impossible for a 10-year-old child to consume without suffering from water toxicity. Tina also denied seeing Jonathan in any distress, and Michael stood by his wife. But BJ, Tina's son, was interviewed, and he backed up Joseph's story. He confirmed the torture Jonathan was forced to experience. Dr. Jeffrey Bernard, who was the medical examiner in this case, was conducting Jonathan's autopsy while Tina and Michael were being interviewed. The case was not yet ruled a homicide because Jonathan's cause of death was not known. But while waiting on the medical examiner's report, police asked Dr. Matthew Cox, a child abuse expert, to discuss the symptoms of dehydration. Dr. Cox said, quote, "A child his age would exhibit progressive symptoms of dehydration, including complaining of thirst, progressively becoming lethargic, appearing dry, cracked lips, sunken eyes, mental status changes, decreased urine output, and eventually shock and cardiac arrest," end quote. And he later explained, quote, "At the time of the presentation to the medical care, he had kidney failure, severe elevated sodium levels in his blood, elevated potassium levels in his blood, liver dysfunction, and severe acid buildup. The electrolyte abnormalities and kidney failure are consistent with severe dehydration. It would take several days of restricted access to cause this degree of laboratory abnormality," end quote. It took almost 1 month to rule out natural causes of Jonathan's death. 1 month to the day of Jonathan's death, Tina and Michael were arrested and charged with a first-degree felony charge of serious bodily injury to a child. After their arrest, police again questioned Tina and Michael, and what they found out from Michael is sickening. Michael confessed that he knew Tina was depriving Jonathan of water, and claimed that he argued with Tina about not letting his son have water. Michael even claimed that he was the one who told Jonathan to sneak water from the bathroom sink. Why would Michael sit in the home and do nothing while one of his sons were slowly fading away? Michael said that he was blind in one eye and wheelchair-bound, so Michael couldn't take care of himself. That's no excuse. Michael had opportunities to save his son and chose not to. He admits that Jonathan was thirsty by telling him to drink from the bathroom sink. He admitted to arguing with Tina. At this point, it just sounds like Michael was trying to pin everything on Tina and take no responsibility for not helping his son. If someone sits there while someone is slowly fading from life, while they are being tortured, they are just as guilty as the perpetrator when he had the authority to do something about this, because that was his son. Michael has also stated that he didn't see anything different with Jonathan. After Michael, Joseph, and BJ gave their statements, the police conducted a custodial interview with Tina. Tina finally admitted that she restricted Jonathan's water intake as a form of discipline, and it didn't cause him any harm in the past, meaning she did this many times, and she saw nothing wrong with it. Tina kept saying she did not mean to kill Jonathan, and even said Jonathan went to a party on Saturday, 2 days before he collapsed, and had cake and soda. We clearly can't take Tina's word for this, and I can't find any other information to back up this claim. But if Jonathan did go and drink soda, that would just add to his dehydration and could have made his symptoms much worse. I find it extremely hard to believe that Jonathan didn't show any signs of distress during this torment. The act of not only restricting water from a child, but using the heat as a torture device is sadistic. Tina must have enjoyed putting Jonathan in timeout while mocking her stepson with the big jug of water in his grasp and refusing to let him have any. That is what I call a monster. It doesn't matter what her intention was. What she did was sickening. Tina chose to abuse, torture, and scapegoat Jonathan and seemingly got supply from this water restriction. This act was not of discipline, but it was an act of self-gratification for a sick woman who saw her stepson as an object instead of a human being who needed water to survive. Tina described Jonathan in her interviews as a, quote, lethargic child who would rather watch television than play outside, end quote, and that Jonathan, quote, was a constant troublemaker, and there was no rhyme or reason for him being bad. He was just bad to be bad, end quote. Any person who scapegoats someone will have a view of that person of being fully bad. They are the problem, and nothing they do is right. With this mindset, the toxic person will often punish the person or child more severely than other people in their life. Scapegoats are only seen as useful if they fully comply and sacrifice themselves to serve the toxic person and have no identity of their own. Jonathan's biological mother described her son as the opposite of Tina's claim. She said that Jonathan was a, quote, sweet and loving boy who loved to play outside, end quote. Of course, Tina described him as lethargic because he was slowly fading away from her abuse. Michael's attorney contacted the state attorney and told them that Michael wanted to testify against Tina. And what's surprising to me about Michael testifying against Tina is that Michael agreed to do it without taking a plea deal to get a lesser sentence. So Michael told the state attorney in his interview that Tina was restricting water more than he originally claimed and admitted Jonathan was sick a few days prior to his death. Michael described Jonathan as lethargic and very thirsty. Michael also stated that Tina was bipolar and all her anger was directed to Jonathan the week of his death. Tina's trial began with the emergency room doctor testifying about Jonathan's condition, and the most telling evidence of dehydration was the fact that Jonathan's bladder was completely dry. Jonathan's mother testified about her son's loving and sweet character to defend the troublemaker label Tina painted on Jonathan. Soon after, when the police officer who went to the house the night of Jonathan's death testified that the house was, quote, stifling at 3 a.m., end quote, when police arrived to take the crime scene photos and investigate. The officer also stated, quote, it was so hot that it was hard to breathe, end quote. Tina's demeanor during both custodial and non-custodial statements were revealed. Tina showed absolutely no remorse for what she had done to Jonathan, and occasionally laughed when she recalled how Jonathan aggravated her days before his death. The jury was able to see Tina's manipulative attempts to hide the truth the medical evidence revealed. As the trial continued, Michael was called to the stand, where he stated that Tina had it out for Jonathan, and Tina would be there to stop Jonathan whenever he tried to get water. He also informed the jury that Jonathan was sick, and he and Tina discussed Jonathan's condition before finally admitting that he and Tina argued over depriving Jonathan of water. Michael had said, quote, I felt like she was the one responsible for him ending up the way he did, end quote. Michael also testified, quote, she comes back and looks at me and rolls her eyes. He just had his eyes roll back into his head. Call 911. End quote. When he was describing the moment Tina told him Jonathan was dying. Michael said that he told Tina on the way to the hospital that if anything happened to his son, he would never forgive her. Joseph testified on day 3 of the trial. He admitted that he was the real troublemaker in the family, not Jonathan. He explained that Jonathan did not wet his bed like the media was portraying, but that Tina was just being mean to Jonathan. Joseph said that the night prior to Jonathan's death, both Tina and Jonathan stayed up all night, and Jonathan had not slept in over 24 hours when he died. Joseph didn't know what Tina was doing to Jonathan at that time. Joseph also stated, quote, "I started panicking because he didn't have a heartbeat, he didn't have a pulse, and I was scared," end quote. This was what Joseph had to witness when he was only 10 years old. He had to watch his twin brother die. That is terrifying. The defense began its case by calling BJ, Tina's son, to the stand. BJ was crying and shaking as he claimed that Jonathan was not in trouble at any time during the visitation. BJ said Jonathan had as much water as he wanted. BJ was just trying to protect his mother. He was staying in foster care at the time of the trial because his stepfather and mother were behind bars. BJ was trying to avoid adoption and pushed away any potential permanent residence because he wanted to go back to his mother. After BJ testified, Tina chose to testify, which was surprising because, unsurprisingly, she had a past record. Tina was found guilty of aggravated assault with a deadly weapon by running over a man with her car and a prior family violence assault conviction against her first husband. The defense made a motion to allow Tina to testify free of impeachment of her past convictions. The defense claimed that it had been 10 years since the aggravated assault charge, but the state argued again that it hadn't been 10 years since Tina's sentence. But the judge found the time limit applicable in the end and allowed Tina to testify without impeachment. In the first hour of direct, Tina explained what a dedicated mother she truly was. That she was the mother who never let her children out of her sight, and that she kept Joseph from failing school. Tina claims she never saw any distress in Jonathan, or she would have taken him to a doctor. Tina made sure to tell the jury that she only minimally restricted Jonathan's water and claimed Jonathan drank water every day. Tina was confronted with the medical evidence that proved Jonathan hadn't had any water for at least several days, but like the narcissist she is, Tina said the doctors were lying. At the cross-examination, Tina admitted she knew depriving anyone of water in extremely hot summer conditions would certainly cause serious bodily injury, like a heat stroke or heat exhaustion. Finally, in closing of Tina's trial, it was argued that Tina didn't even need to see Jonathan in distress, because right before Jonathan collapsed, Tina gave him what he desperately needed: water. Tina gave Jonathan several glasses and even put Jonathan in a bathtub and filled it up with water. While defense claimed that Tina didn't know what she was doing, since she couldn't see any sign of illness in Jonathan. After 3 hours of deliberation, the jury returned with a verdict of guilty with a charge of reckless bodily injury to a child. This offense carries a punishment range of 2 to 20 years in prison, but for Tina, the punishment was increased to 5 to life. Jonathan's maternal grandmother, Sue, gave her testimony. Sue felt a tremendous amount of guilt for not being able to keep her grandson away from his father's home. Sue felt like she didn't have a choice in keeping Jonathan away due to the visitations being court-ordered. She asked the jury to give Tina a lengthy sentence and gave a victim impact statement of, quote, "We trusted you with our baby. If I could speak for Jonathan right now, I would know, you would know, that he still loves you," end quote. Sue stated that she forgave Tina, but Jonathan's other family members did not. Defense called Tina's father to give his statement. Tina's father had only been in Tina's life for 5 years before the trial. And Tina's father claimed that Tina was a good person and she was sorry for what happened to Jonathan, and he asked for the 5-year minimal sentence for his daughter. Tina then took the stand before her sentencing and testified that her previous assault charges weren't her fault, but she was responsible for Jonathan's death. Tina had also expressed in cross-examination that she felt it was justified if she hurt someone because they made her angry. The state then asked for a life sentence for Tina. In approximately 20 minutes, the jury returned with a verdict of 85 years in prison for Tina. Later in May of 2013, Michaelrayjames pleaded guilty to second-degree injury to a child and was sentenced to 20 years in prison. What do you think of that sentence? Jonathan wasn't injured. He was murdered. Even if it wasn't intentional, Tina still killed her stepson and deserved to have murder charges. If Jonathan didn't succumb to dehydration, how long would Tina continue to torture him? She thinks it's okay that if someone hurts her or makes her angry, that she's allowed to hurt them. That is disgusting. It's important that we talk about these cases and understand that there is true evil in this world. If you ever have a suspicion of someone that may be hurting a child or you've seen someone hurt their child, please report it. If you see something, say something. We have to make this stop. Stay safe.